4 of Light Her Project podcast. Real women,
real talk.
I'm Rachel Strella.
And I'm Vixen.
Thank you for tuning in today. Today's topic is caring for aging parents.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
it's a touchy one.
You know how we like to start our podcast talking about our personal experiences. And I certainly have a lot of experience with this. So right now, both my parents are still alive, and I have guardianship over my mother. I have co-guardianship with my dad because she suffered a mental illness a few years ago. So she's kind of my responsibility now. And my dad, well, he's had a lot of health problems the past 20, 25 years, but most recently, he was in the hospital for cellulitis, and then they found out he had a bleeding peptic ulcer, and he still got the cellulitis. So definitely got my hands full with aging parents. Both of them live about an hour away, and they live out in the middle of nowhere, which also makes that complicated because they don't have easy access to any type of medical care. Top of that, obviously when you have in-laws, they're your family too.
Right.
Suddenly in March, unexpectedly, my father-in-law passed away, and he was primary caretaker for my mother-in-law, and we had a huge responsibility taking that on. It was a lot to already deal with his death and all that came with that, but we also had a lot to deal with his mom in terms of getting her the care that she was used to, figuring out what we want to do long term because her solution wasn't sustainable. We finally found a place for her in Hershey. It's a retirement community, a senior living community.
Mm-hmm.
She's been less than cooperative with that. So it's definitely adding to, the stress. It feels like it takes up a lot more of my day to handle any one of 3 of these parents than to handle myself.
I don't have quite that situation. My father passed away several years ago. I mean, over 10 years ago, like a long time. And my mother is actually in pretty good health for her age. She'll be 80 this year.
Wow.
And she does listen to me for the most part about things that when she has a health issue, she'll call me about it. What should she do? And I like that she listens to me because of my medical background. I think that's why she likes that. But so I'm also sort of caring for an aging parent, but she's a lot more independent than what your situation is. She does also live in a senior community, but she's in the independent side. She does most everything for herself. Of course, they have the luxury. They have chefs, and they have someone who comes in and cleans, and they have it's great living in a senior community. But yeah, so we pretty much, the siblings and I pretty much pay the bill along with her. Like we put all the money together, even hers and all of ours, to make sure. And it's, it's a couple of $1,000 a month, more than that. But for her to be able to have all of that and then access, though, in a senior community, in case you're wondering, access, if they do have a problem, someone medically is there to always help. So like in your situation, your mom's going to have a problem, your mother-in-law is going to have a problem, that sort of thing. There is going to be someone right there to help. So that's always great.
Yeah, and I mean, from what you've told me, your mom is appreciative of where she's at. There was no expectation of anything else.
Oh, no. My mother, I found out, and I didn't even know this till after she started living there. She said that she did not expect to live in the hotel living, is what she calls it. She expected to just go to a senior living, like, not with all of this,
nursing home,
very basic senior living care facility. But the fact that she had all of us and we're all doing okay for ourselves, then she's raising us well really prompted her to be able to do this, is really how it was.
Yeah, I understand. And I mean, there are some places where you could put parents that are a little less than hotel living. Uh, so it is honestly, after looking at where my mother-in-law is, it is a beautiful resort that she lives on, and they have activities every hour. They have meals. They have the physical therapists that come to you. They have these little trolleys to take you out on excursions. I mean, there's always something going on. It's beautiful, 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom place. So definitely something I'd love for my own parents to take advantage of at some point in time.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
well, let's go to a couple questions. I know that we've been on this formula now with questions. So one question that was brought to our attention is in other cultures, it's
Mhm.
expected that your parents live with you, that they live with the children, and that they're taken care of. But in America, we typically just put them in a nursing home. Wow.
Yeah.
Way to touch on the guilt strings there.
I like that, guilt strings. I have to use that.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a matter of communication. In all honesty, the way these things are communicated when they're doing well before they get to this point where we're talking to each parent and dealing with this parent, before that, when they're vibrant, when they're our age, I'm in my 50s, you're in your 40s, when you our age, if we communicate these to whomever we're designating this to on what we expect, then it won't be a shocker. But I'll tell you what, a lot of communication falls away to the wayside until it's 5 seconds till you need to make that decision.
Yes. Right. You're
No
absolutely
planning.
right. You're right. We're very unprepared.
Yeah, very, very, no planning, no planning.
Yeah, I think we believe we're going to live forever, or at least that's what I think our parents think because they don't typically proactively make those plans, and that's where it's challenging. Now that I've seen what's happened with my own in-laws, I want my parents to make a plan, and it's not happening.
Well, you know what? They do think, and I don't think it's advocated. I don't think people, like we're talking about it, I don't think people they talk about death, what's going to happen to their things, and so on and so forth. But before they even talk about emergency care, like if they go into the hospital, if they're, you have a DNR, but they don't talk about prior, even before that, which is caring, what we're dealing with,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. That needs to be talked about, but no one's advocating for it. So let's advocate for it, Rachel. Let's do it.
I think we should. I mean, one of the things I always remember, my lawyer, so many people want to go right for a will when they're thinking about what's going to happen. And she always says, before you do a will, you want POA. You've got to have power of attorney because the likelihood that the person that you're talking about is going to have some sort of inability to represent themselves and they'll be incapacitated is much higher than that they're just going to die. So that was a big lesson for me is to always get that POA in place. And I do have one for my dad, and by virtue of being guardian of my mom, that's there. So that's at least one step forward. So at any point in time where we feel like they can't make their own decisions, there are actions we can take to make those decisions for them. But you never hope that you have to come to that.
Right, right. You don't want to think about it. You don't even, but the reality is you would be thankful that you had it
Yeah.
if that situation were to come to pass. And maybe, like you said, maybe you'll never use it. You'll never need it.
Like insurance. You never know, but better to have it.
Than
Yeah.
not.
Well, another question that came up was about the role of siblings and how you handle when one sibling steps up and the other one doesn't to help out, with mom and dad.
Ah, problems, problems, problems. That can lead to a couple of things. It can lead to resentment
Hmm.
because the person who's doing most of the work um, doesn't feel appreciated, They wonder why the other person is not stepping up. And even if they do know why, honestly, it's one of those where they can do something. Like that's what they can do something. It could be financially, it could be physically, because a lot of times people think financially only,
Mm-hmm.
whereas physically does help a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people don't think of that.
Nope. It's one piece of the pie.
Absolutely.
I find that from what I understand and from my own experience with everything, the oldest sibling tends to take on the majority of the responsibility by virtue of being the oldest. For my husband is the oldest in his family, and so he was over the finances. He was first in line for POA. But I've heard a lot of different stories from people, and you're right. There is resentment when there are siblings that won't step up and they expect it to be handled by someone else. I don't have that situation. My brother actually, he lived with my parents up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So he was helping them pretty much 24/7. When he moved out, that was when we really had to figure out how we were going to get the care for them. So I never had that issue, but I've seen that resentment in other people that I know. And that's a hard situation because there's no handbook for how to handle these things.
Well, it's also something where sometimes the sibling has a hard time caring for themselves.
Yes. Yep.
Not everyone is successful. Not everyone's doing well in whatever they're doing. So sometimes they have their own struggles. So they're not just not helping. It's hard for them to help themselves. And
Yes.
so in that case, that's always difficult as well, because then you're like, okay, so-and-so will help, so-and-so and so-and-so will help, but we know so-and-so is not going to help us.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
know that's the person that's not going to help. That's the person that's not going to give you any money. That's the person that's not going to show up. Like, there could be that person too. So that by virtue of that situation, that's where the resentment comes in, because then it's like, well, if you would have taken better care of yourself,
Yes.
then you would have been able to help. So there's that. So that's resentment all around.
You are 100% correct. I see that a lot. The older I get, unfortunately, the more people I know that are passing, and that's very true.
Awful though.
Well, we'll go to another question here. How do you take care of yourself while also taking care of your parents? And I know that Vixen is the queen of self-care. And, no matter what you're going through, you still have to do some things for yourself because it's not sustainable to just run ragged constantly. And I've seen people that try to do it. You still have to have some other way to take care of yourself. And I'll admit, for me, and all the things that I've been going through with my parents and my in-laws, there are some things that I did that were not nice to myself, the lack of sleep, the cause of stress. But it was the little things I did too that helped me get through. I would still get a massage, or I'd still take 30 minutes to exercise. Just those things that help you feel like you're a human being, when you have so much going on.
The routines, making a routine always helps. It's one of those things where you may not have the same routine that you had before. You need to change it because of the circumstances, but there's a time, and remember we talked boundaries. There is a point when you have to say no or stick to that schedule, whatever it is that makes you stick to that schedule. Because let's just take an example. Say at 9 o'clock at night, you always watch, I don't know, NCIS. I don't know what comes on at 9 o'clock, but let's say it's NCIS. And you always watch that and you enjoy that. You're sitting there with the popcorn, eating that, while you're watching it. That's something you enjoy. It takes your mind out of reality, your reality. And sometimes it's not always good to stay in your reality if you have chaos going on. So you need to keep doing that. It may not cost you anything. It may not cost you a massage. It may not cost you a facial. Eventually, though, you'll need to get one. But it may not cost any of that. Just some time alone for yourself where you can get out of your own thoughts. That is sometimes mentally enough.
Yes.
Or at least a great start.
You are absolutely right. I remember when I was waiting for my dad to get a surgery before he went into ICU a couple weeks ago, and you said, go on your phone, turn on a show, watch, take your mind off things. It's so hard to do that when you're in the thick of it. But I went home that night, and after I showered, I just binge watched. I think they call it revenge binge sometimes when you do that, but I needed to just veg out and pretend like what was going on wasn't actually happening for just a little bit. So you're right. There are plenty of things that you can do that don't cost a thing, but it helps keep you sane. It's your whatever your routine is. Those things that you do. Uh, while we're talking about this, we like to talk a lot about what we're seeing, and one of the things that we came across was a TikTok post where a woman was talking about caring for loved ones,
Mm-hmm.
and how you care for them and you put your life on hold, to do that. And she said the common thing you've probably heard if anybody's ever been on a plane is you must put on your own oxygen mask before you attempt to assist others. So, that oxygen mask is like what we need to do with our self-care and well-being to be able to successfully and sustainably deal with struggles with our loved ones.
Well, here's people. This is what people do. And especially women, caretakers by nature. Okay, this is what we do. So the oxygen mask is hanging right here, right here. But we see it, but we think we can get to it. But just one more thing, one more thing,
Yep.
one more thing, till you never quite get there. You just miss it. And then that's when we get sick. That's when we get run down. That's when someone says, "Oh my God, you look terrible." You may look terrible. They don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear it,
No.
but you might look terrible. And the reason you look terrible is because you look exhausted. You just look exhausted. Your body is out of oxygen. It's time to get the mask on. You should have got it on like a couple days back. But
Yeah.
we have to stop doing that. We do. In all honesty, ladies, listen to me. We have to stop doing that because not only do you look terrible, but you look run down and you feel it. And when you feel it, and then who's going to take care of you?
Yeah.
Tell me, if you're the caregiver, so who is going to take care of you? I want you to think about that. And if they do, are they going to do a good job, or are they going to, girl, when where was I? I was out of town. Do you know my family called me because they didn't know how to work the dishwasher?
Oh,
Okay. So, I mean, that means I must be a good caretaker, right? But sometimes you can be too good that they're not able to take
yeah,
care of you in the right way.
absolutely.
So think
You're
about that.
right. You are right. You're right again. I have no other comment other than you're right. We do tend to take on that one other thing. Really, we don't know where our limits are. We
No.
have to start learning them because by the time we feel it, it's too late.
Yes, yes. Some people, for instance, some people have a very high tolerance for pain. Like when I give a massage, I can tell, girl, I can feel those muscles. They are awful. But you know what they'll say? No, I feel fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell they should have reached for that oxygen mask like way back there. So I tell people like that, I say, okay, when you start to feel pain, if this is fine for you, when you start to feel pain, it's already an emergency
Yes.
because their tolerance is so high that they missed the signals that they should have gotten. So ladies, understand, if you have a high tolerance for doing things, understand that when you start to feel exhausted, it's already an emergency.
Yes.
Okay, so you have to take heed of that. On the other hand, we have the opposite ladies, right? Who are just like, I broke a nail. I need to take a moment. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we have that too, and that's okay. But just know the type of person that you are.
Yeah. Right. I'm glad that you said this because one of the things that I struggle with specifically is dealing with my parents when there's something wrong,
Mhm.
okay, evidently wrong, and they don't do anything about it till it is beyond an emergency. And the hardest thing is when you can lead that horse to water. I could say 100 times, you need to get this looked at right now.
Hmm.
But when it comes to ailments, nope, they're not great. And the problem with that is, by the time it's an emergency, it's super taxing on everybody else around them. And I tell my dad this all the time. By the time this becomes an emergency, Dad, now it's also really taxing on me and my brother and my husband and anybody else around me, my team. It's a trickle effect. So why do we wait? Why do we wait till something is an emergency to try to get it fixed or looked at or recognize it?
Because in our mind, we can handle it, but we don't think about, like you talk about this trickle effect. I am 100% certain that the person who that happened to did not consider
Yeah.
what was going to happen to the people around them. I
Yeah.
can guarantee you 100% they did not figure that out. They're just going to take it, and they're going to take it until they can't. And then they need help. And who's going to help them? Who's going to come to the rescue? Super Rachel.
Yep.
Super
You're right.
Rachel.
And it's honestly it's an ignorance, but it's not. It's they don't know. In my dad's mind, he was worried because of guardianship over my mom, getting her medications. Again, he can't go to the hospital. Someone's got to take care of the dog and this and that. But I said, Dad, I got it. I can handle it. But for him, that's what he's worried about, is he can't take care of his immediate responsibilities. And he doesn't realize, by the time you take this to an emergency situation, it becomes a responsibility for all of us on a much higher level.
Yes, because when you get to that emergency level, that thing that might have taken you a little while, a day or so, now you're in the hospital for 7 days.
Exactly.
So what was worse? Taking that,
Exactly.
right.
But they
So
can strong arm the way through it. I can do it. I'm fine. All right. I think I had the same conversation about 30 times the past couple of weeks. So I just pray it'll be all right. And for the record, my dad, he's a fan of the podcast. I love him. He's great, wonderful man. This is more of something where I feel like this is not something I'm dealing with alone.
right.
I think a lot of people have this feeling, and it's really hard when you have people who don't know what they don't know.
Well, I think it's a matter of this whole thing is really a matter of communication.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if, for instance, this person realizes what's going to happen if they continue to do this on other people and how it's going to affect, they may not take those same actions.
Yeah.
Same thing with caring for the parents in general. So, for all you listening that are not in this situation yet, you're lucky, because now you have the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to sit down and have this conversation and figure out how you want this to go, and how mom or dad or in-laws wants this to go. Because then, if and when that time comes, you already have a game plan, you already know what you're doing, and everyone has already agreed upon it.
I will say that those conversations are not always well received. I remember trying to talk with both my in-laws and my parents about what about this and what about that, and they'd say things like, "Oh, you're being morbid," or something like that, where it's like they're avoiding that conversation. And then I feel like that's pretty common. We still want to believe that we're going to exist forever. We're never going to be a burden on everybody. So as much as that sounds great, not everybody's there, and that's the hard part. Then it becomes, again, taxing when it does happen.
That's true. I'm totally agreeing with you. I think you're completely right on that. When people do not receive the death conversation, the incapacitated conversation, all
Yeah.
these types of conversations. But I think maybe if you put it in this way, would they rather be somewhere with a tennis court, a swimming pool, Or would they rather just have a room?
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure. For me, it's a window. I want to see a bird. Put a bird feeder outside my window. This is my request.
Yeah.
This is what I want. So have that conversation. And if they're not willing to take that conversation, kind of put it that way. Mom, I feel like I see you. I see you with a bird feeder. I see you with, is that what you would want later? Whatever it is. If she's a tennis player, does she want, maybe she can't play tennis at that point, but maybe she can play bocce.
You know what? You can lead a horse and attempt these conversations and try, but not everybody's going to be receptive to them. And that's just the reality of it too. It is, I'm definitely a planner. Like 10 years ago, I had my POA, my will, everything, my digital directive. I update it every year. Do I want to die? No. Am I going to die? Someday, yes. And that reality is I need to make sure that everything's taken care of with people around me if that happens.
There's a song that says, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go now.
Exactly. Real good question we could dive into another day. I've heard this is a fun podcast topic. What would you, if you knew that the date that you were going to die, would you want to know? So that could be one that we could think about.
Oh, would I want to know? Oh, I only need 5 minutes. I need 5 minutes.
That's a tough one. I kind of want to, like, I kind of then fall into that. I want to be in denial that it would actually happen, the countdown, the clock. I feel like I'm constantly watching it.
Yeah, too much time, I think, would be like a little bit agonizing.
Yeah.
But like, I just need 5 minutes and a phone. 5 minutes with a phone. If I need a phone, I can record anything that I want to say. 5 minutes.
Well, we have one more. What we're seeing here. If you guys recall from previous podcasts, am I the asshole? So we're back to am I the asshole for not bending over backwards to help my aging parents? And here's the context: a woman who often helps clean her aging parents' house finally said, "I'm not doing it," and she did this because she has a family of her own.
Okay.
The house was just cleaned a week prior, and her sister, who doesn't have much on her plate, was very able to do it. And it was her sister, not the parents, who asked her to clean again.
Oh.
So, am I the asshole for not bending over backwards?
That's a bold move.
Yeah.
So, am I right? Is what you're saying? So, her parents did not ask her. It was her sister. That's a bold move on her sister's part. Like expecting her to do it when her sister could have just done it herself. No. And to answer your question, no, absolutely not. She is not the asshole. Not at all. No. She had every right.
I agree with you. If the sister's so concerned, go ahead and clean the house yourself. Why would you coordinate that with somebody who's got enough on their plate? But one thing that I found is when somebody takes responsibility for something, even just one time, it's assumed that they're going to continue that responsibility. And that's not correct or fair. It should be a shared responsibility, especially when people have a lot of other things on their plate.
Well, even if she decided that that was what she was going to do, which I guess she had her own schedule and it wasn't every week apparently, but for her to tidy up like that and to do it, she just did it the week before. First of all, why does she need to do it again? Like in that frame of time, that sort of thing. So it sounds like it was maybe a little tidying up that needed to happen, and it wasn't even a deep clean if her sister just cleaned the week before. So that is what's her sister's deal. So I would so love to know more about this story.
I know. Well, you can check it out on Reddit. It's there. A lot of comments about it. But I agree with you. I do not think that she's an asshole. I think that, I'm learning a lot from the situation with my father-in-law dying, and you figure out quickly who's going to step up and help and who's not. And it is a shared responsibility. It's unfair of somebody to assume that somebody else is going to do it just because they did it the first time. That's really not cool. I can go on about that, but I'm going to wrap it up here. So, we're coming to the end of the podcast, Vixen. Is there anything else you want to say about this topic?
I just want to reiterate, it's all about planning. Honestly, there is a but to that. You don't have to plan if everyone is okay, if everyone's doing well for themselves, if they can come up with a good amount of money on the fly, you know what I mean? Then, as long as everyone's in agreement, I want to go here, you can go there. It doesn't really require planning because it's not like they're holding a spot for you.
Right.
As long as you go where you want to go with the means, you really don't have to plan. But as long as they want to still have that conversation like you talked about.
Yeah.
They have to want to do it.
I agree with you. I think that regardless of what we do for our parents or whether or not they cooperate, it's important for us to have our own plan. I think that's what I would want to emphasize. Know what you want to do later in life. What's your retirement plan? What's your plan for after? What do you want to leave behind? There's all these things, but really just thinking about your own plan, because that's all we have control over ultimately.
It is true. And so when you talk to your lawyer or your estate planner or whomever, make sure to include the nursing home or I'm going to call it the pre-death situation. Let's go with that. There's the death situation, and then there's the pre-death situation. So make sure to include that in what you're saying.
We skip right over that, and that's very important, and that's why the POA is so important too.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fun topic. It's been very cathartic for me. I want to thank you, Vixen. I want to thank the audience for tuning in to Light Her Project podcast. You can follow the conversation online with our hashtag Light Her Project. In the meantime, keep it real women,
real talk.